Our final speaker of the session is somebody I'm glad to call a good friend of mine. And it's a real treat to have Congressman Robert Dold with us today. And I can say way too much, so I will keep it and I won't say anything. My good friend, Bob Dold.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's certainly it's fantastic to be here with you with some pest management professionals. I like to tell people when they ask me why in the world I ran for Congress, I tell them, well, I felt that the federal government was making it harder and harder for me to put the key in the door and open up my business each and every day. And frankly, they should be doing quite the opposite. They should be making it easier for me to do so. I also like to tell them that the reason why I was probably elected is I told people that I'm in the pest management industry, and they said that's perfect for Washington. So, and it is, let's be honest, we've got a lot of issues in Washington. It is great to be back home and with people that actually understand what it's like to meet a budget and a payroll, what it's like to actually get out there and get their hands dirty and actually provide service for families, for businesses. Certainly we're going to talk more about multifamily housing. Phil wanted me to come up and talk to you about federal legislation and where things are going today and how I think things will probably be shaped going forward. Obviously, the biggest piece of legislation that we have right now is going to be H.R. 967, which is going to focus on bed bugs. The actual title, sponsored by Gene Schmidt of Ohio, is the BedBug Prevention and Research Act. So we have to just ask ourselves, we'll talk a little bit really quickly about what this does and what it outlines. First thing it does is it talks about awarding grants for bedbug management and eradication, appoints a bedbug task force, awards grants for related research and projects, and then it does a couple other things. Specifically, that first part is not part of FIFRA. That first part actually is dealing, it amends the Food, Agriculture, Conservation, and Trade Act of 1990. H.R. 967 also will try to amend FIFRA to include bed bugs as part of the quote vector, which I think is absolutely going to be fantastic in terms of trying to enable us to do more things. Part of the other stuff that H.R. 967 does is it deals with all of those manufacturers out there that say they've got the next new silver bullet for bed bugs, whether it be cedar oil or something else along those lines. So if you make that claim that your product is going to be the one that takes care of bed bugs, it requires that you have some efficacy data behind it, which I think is absolutely important. So it's trying to infuse some more common sense approach to bed bugs. We know that in our industry, and that's nice to say again, in our industry, bed bugs are certainly the one thing that is on the rise. In this downturn, we can look at it and say, thank goodness we've had bed bugs, because this is something that we need to get educated about. Glad to see the entomologists all up here in the front row. You guys really got to get moving forward. Something we need to get educated about what it is that we're doing. We saw the New York Times just the other day put out a story about how this is really a public health problem, how people are trying to treat it themselves. We saw a fatality in North Carolina. Trust me, that's going to come back and they're going to try to be pointing fingers back at the pest management industry. It's up to us to make sure that we get out there and let them know that it's because people are taking this into their own hands. It's got to be about education. We need to make sure that we're educating the public, our municipalities. We need to make sure that we're talking to our state government, whether that be your state representatives and state senators. Because when you talk about bed bugs, their ears will perk up. We need to be talking about how do we move this legislation forward. H.R. 967 is really more of a pilot program. A pilot program that really is going to focus on trying to bring resources into 3 states. One of them, you can only guess. Let me just tell you, Gene Schmidt's from Ohio, so guess what state one of those is going to be. Ohio will be one of those states that get resources. My guess is New York will certainly be another, because that happens to be one of the largest areas when we look at where the bedbug infestation and problems have been. And the third is still up to some sort of negotiation, but my guess is it will also be in the Northeast as well. So then the question then becomes, what is it that we can be doing? What's important there? I do think it's important that the federal government try to reach out and engage pest management professionals. Something that has been certainly a headache for most of us when we say, how about some industry expertise? Because if you go to EPA, and I know others have been, when they've dealt with EPA, sitting in a room with 26 to 28 EPA regulators. The simple question is, how many of you have ever been out to see what it is that we do in our businesses? Well, I can tell you from my experience, when I asked that same question, not a single hand went up. So the offer was then made. We'll happily have you come out to any one of the businesses, wherever you may be. We'll make it as easy as possible. We want to make sure that those people that are out there regulating our industry know exactly what it is that we do, the steps that we go through. Now, we've had to really do, I would say, a Herculean lift, because over the last, we'll call it 50 years, with obviously the exception of these last several, bedbugs haven't been a big problem. Yet if you pull up industry magazines, and if you're like my father, you keep all of them. If you pull up industry magazines from the late 40s, there they are, big as life, bedbugs. So we've had to really evolve as an industry to figure out how we go about trying to eradicate this problem. What role will the federal government play? I think if we take a look at the momentum that bedbugs have, not just for our industry, but for people that are now all of a sudden paying attention. We know that they're not a disease vector, right? Mosquitoes are obviously one of those big things, but let me just tell you, when you're dealing with somebody in a residential environment, you got mosquitoes in the backyard, you got bedbugs in the bedroom, bedbugs are going to be the problem. So federal government, I think, now does recognize that this is a huge public health issue, and one that we have to try to get our arms around. So I think there are going to be resources that are going to try to be targeted towards how do we best handle bedbugs going forward. But let me tell you that the super committee that we're all hearing about, this will hinge on whether there will be resources or not. Super committee, the gang of 12, if you will, has been tasked to try to find another $1.5 trillion in cuts. Where are they going to find those? Are they going to go to existing places right now that have targeted this opportunity for us to be able to put dollars towards research? Give some resources, maybe to Dr. Potter up here, see if he can do some additional things so we can get some more answers. That's still a big question mark. We don't know what the super committee is going to come up with. We will know shortly. They have to have their recommendations before the United States Congress and Senate by November 23rd. We have to vote on them by December 23rd. So a lot of things are being hinged on that super committee right now. It would be amazing to think that the pest management industry also is hanging some stuff on that super committee, but it's absolutely true in terms of what it is that we're going to be doing. I sit on the Financial Services Committee, and most people would say, oh my gosh, financial services, I know most of you want to be sit on agriculture, and for the 10th district in Illinois, I think that probably wouldn't have been as good. We've got 2 farms in the entire 10th district, but what we do regulate, what we do oversee in the Financial Services Committee is housing. So HUD reports to the Financial Services Committee. And if we can just think about that, why is that important? When we think about multifamily housing from the government perspective, HUD is huge. We've got some conflicts right now between property owners and tenants. Who is in charge of making sure that their bedbugs are eradicated out of these facilities? There's a legislation out there right now, HUD rulings, actually, in the regulations saying that the property owner must certify that the room is bedbug free. Okay, you can make that certification, except also there are written from HUD saying that they are prevented from inspecting unless the tenant will give you permission. Well, how in the world are we going to certify, if you are a property owner, that the apartment is bed-bug free if you're not able to get in and inspect the apartment? I mean, you and I both know that that is absolutely impossible to do. You're not even able to inspect their belongings before they come in. And you and I both know that that is a huge problem. Are they bringing that problem into the facility? And also, if they're in the facility, is it one potential apartment that is infecting the rest? There's one root cause of the bedbug problem that is going to say we're not going to allow you to come in and inspect not only our apartment but our things. You can obviously see where this becomes an enormous problem. For the property owners that are getting tax breaks, you are potentially in breach and violation of those tax breaks as well, because your leases will be broken. Lenders will have a problem. So you can see how this all of a sudden starts to ratchet up, and you have a real big problem for the land and property owners. So the question then becomes, can we educate HUD about what type of a problem they are creating for us, for the property owners, and what can we do realistically without violating people's individual rights and yet still be able to try to accomplish our goal. It's tough. Let me tell you also that what each and every one of us needs to be doing is we need to be focusing in on our state legislatures. Illinois is going to have something that's supposed to be given to the Assembly by the end of the year about what we should be doing with regard to bedbugs. They have 3 industry professionals that are apparently also weighing in on this. Are they doing the same in your state? Are you weighing in? Are you offering your services to say, hey, we'd love to be able to try to work with you, figure out what it is we should be doing? There's no question that this will be a big issue, and it will absolutely capture the attention of those that are in public office, because it is a huge public health concern. Are we going to solve the problem tomorrow? No. The legislation that's before Congress right now is probably in H.R. 967, will be attached to the Farm Bill. Why is that a positive? It's because the Farm Bill most likely will move. A standalone bill on bedbugs probably is not going to get through the United States Congress or Senate by the President. The Farm Bill will. So that's encouraging that we're going to probably attach the main portions of that to the Farm Bill. But I tell you what, we can go down a lot of different paths about what's happening in Washington, both with pest management, within the Ag Committee, or any other thing you'd like to talk about. So why don't we do this? I know Phil's given me a pretty tight timeline. And your timer, I think, is still stuck at 30, Phil. So let's open it up to questions. Let's go down the path that you want to go down about what's happening either in Washington, what's going on with the super committee, what's happening with legislation, or frankly, anything you'd like.
Just so everybody knows what we're going to do, and just to clarify, we're going to have 12 minutes for direct to Bob, and then we have another 15 to 20 minutes for both Bob, Mike, and Dr. Adler. Okay? Anybody? Jeff?
Please say your name, who you are. Mike Morris, graduate advocate. One question for you, sir, is that on HR 967, do you know how much the dollars are being proposed in that legislation?
I don't know what the exact dollar amount is in that, but what it's really trying to do is allocate existing resources that may be available right now and allow them to be used for research for bed bugs, and also trying to focus it on are the preventative measures that we should be doing. It's 3 states that they're trying to do. It would authorize the Secretary of Agriculture to be able to release those funds to do exactly what it is that we'd like them to do, which is let's shine a little bit of light on what's been going on with bed bugs. Let's put a little bit more focus and emphasis on research, which is music to our ears, because it's not talking about research that, although many of our good friends up here in the front love to know about the mating habits of the tsetse fly, we want to know about stuff that really impacts our day-to-day business and also how it impacts the public at large. And bedbugs is clearly, I would say, the biggest topic with regard to that.
If this money is only going to go to 3 states, how come this is not park?
Well, what it's designed to do, the question on the 3 states, what it's designed to do is put the pilot program together, which is something that I think that we as taxpayers want to make sure that our dollars are going furthest. And what we don't want to do is go very, very thin and allow it to go all over the place. We want to make sure that we're targeting and saying, is a pilot program that's going on right now effective? What changes need to be made to it in order to make better strides? So they're really going to try to target in some of the bigger, more highly impacted areas. And so that's why they've chosen 3 states. If you wanted to go for a broader thing, you want to say, let's do it nationwide, there would be probably not enough resources to do it effectively, and it probably wouldn't really get off the ground. By taking it very narrowly, we have a chance to really make some strides and prove what is the outcomes that some of the entomologists, some of the researchers would be able to come up with.
And as one of those researchers, how is the research money going to go to 3 states? And who's going to do the research in New York City? Do they have somebody have a bunch of bedbug colonies up there?
I do not know how they're going to pick and choose. Right now, the battle is to be able to free up the money so that the Secretary of Agriculture would then be able to, disseminate those resources. So obviously, there's going to be a grab, I assume, once those dollars are then freed up in terms of who's going to go out there and do it. And I'm not so sure that the research is tied to those 3 states as much as the dollars trying to go for eradication would go to those 3 states. The research would obviously want to go to the best researchers and the ones that have some real success and some momentum.
David Kane, BedBug University in London. I haven't had a chance to review the HR 967 and it's not particularly internationally relevant, but I did wonder, there's a hot potato that no one's managed to pick up yet, which is about the independent validation of technologies free from the inventor's supply chain. Is that something that's going to be addressed in this bill?
You're talking about a patent.
No. There are a large number of technologies, some of which I have tested, and they are absolutely awful. But there is no one who's prepared to stand up to the president and say, look guys, this is a scam. This is like the bomb detectors that were put out in Iraq. It's not ethical and not efficacious, and we need to take a stand and say, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Yes.
But at present, no one is prepared to actually bite the bullet and make a mistake.
This legislation in 967 does have provisions in there that must test the efficacy. So if you're saying that this will, whatever it be, this cedar oil or this whatever plant oil that you've got or new device that you have, if you're making that claim, this is requiring the studies to actually show that it does exactly what you're telling it does. So again, trying to protect the consumer, because we know that there are a lot of people out there in essence, this bedbug craze that say, I've got the next new thing, the silver bullet. Well, you and I both know the silver bullet is very tough to find. In fact, really what it requires is a heck of a lot of vigilance, a lot of inspection techniques, a lot of training, and good old-fashioned hard work to be able to truly eradicate bedbugs. And so what this does do is to say to those out there that are going to try to come up with the new snake oil, that that's no good. That you've got to be able to have some efficacy data behind it, and it's going to have to be proven. And I hope that's addressing what you're talking about a little bit. Well, I mean, the question was is that he's actually done research behind actual items, things that people claim are going to get rid of bed bugs, and they absolutely fail. And nobody's willing to step up and say those types of things. And I would argue that you're certainly, if you look down at the end of the row, down there, there's a guy that's doing those things and willing to say they don't work. So with Dr. Potter, and I know a number of other folks that are doing research, certainly Rick Cooper is doing a heck of a lot of research on these things. We don't want to. In our industry, we are not looking for claims about things that work. We want to actually talk about things that do, in which case it just heightens the professionalism of our industry. So I think that you will find that there are people out there that are saying, no, this doesn't work. They happen to not be the ones that are creating these things, but if you look at the researchers, I think that they will.
Congressman, reality of what do you think timeline? Will this get through this Congress? When it makes it through this Congress, when will the funds be made available to the researchers, which then need obviously some time to do the research before we got any benefits from it?
The timeline on at least the legislation for HR 967 puts out there September 2017 to be able to get those dollars out. So it's a long, but that gives the time for the research for the results to come back. They would be talking about trying to get those dollars out. If indeed it passed, if indeed we can get this passed now, we would see dollars freed up almost immediately to be able to do that. The results we want to see back, they'd have until 2017.
Congressman, more a general question. Now that you walk the halls of Congress and interact with governors, and mayors, and legislators,
It's more fun to interact with you.
can you give us a sense, though? I mean, do you feel that there are mayors and governors and legislators in states beyond, obviously, states like Ohio, that understand the severity of this problem? You're on the Finance Committee. I mean, in terms of the impact on tourism, the impact on industries like everything from hospitality to the movie industry and so forth. Do they get it, or are they just completely asleep still for the most part?
I would say that the majority of legislators, and I would include your mayors are probably closer to the problem because they hear it more regularly. But I would say that there's still a huge hurdle that we have to do in terms of education, because most legislators, most governors are focused on other things. They think this is a fairly small and narrow problem for them. It is a problem. Certainly the hospitality industry realizes how big this problem is. We need to lean on them to help the legislators recognize that this is a big, significant problem. But I would say that the vast majority, 99% of legislators do not recognize how big this issue is. I'm at 97%.
That's the word from Salem. My question is, HR 967 remain completely. Research results would be very skewed if it was totally isolated to the market.
I don't know if they're designed to say it has to remain completely in those states. The research dollars, I don't know about the research dollars there. I know that the dollars for the eradication part of it would be focused solely in those 3 states that are pilot program. Research, I think, would be much broader. You could take the research from a variety of different areas, which I think would be important. Because it would skew if you just went to one area as opposed to others.